Hello YouTube, Sir Dragon X here, coming to you straight from Santa Fe, New Mexico. That's right folks, I just traveled back to the United States to take care of some personal business. Speaking of traveling, I recently drove from San Miguel de Allende through Monterey to McAllen, Texas to catch a flight here. Today we're going to answer the age-old question, is Mexico a dangerous place to live? I'm going to discuss the highway of death and share some quick safety tips in the video coming up next. Welcome back to Retired Life in Mexico, No Bull. Not only will we present you with the facts, but we present you with the true reality. Today, I'm going to take on a very controversial topic. Is Mexico a dangerous and violent place to live? Is it safe to travel in Mexico? Well, I'm going to answer that question, and some expats will be surprised at my answer and probably won't agree. My answer is yes. Mexico is a dangerous place to live. And with the recent highway of death disappearances, this is just a reminder that expats are not immune to cartel violence here in Mexico. The highway of death just happens to be one of the most common routes expats take traveling to and from the United States. Actually, at the present time, this stretch of highway has been classified as the most dangerous stretch of highway by the Mexican government. I am going to dispel some myths that expats have about the dangers of living in Mexico, and many may be surprised at my answer. At the same time, I'm going to give you some travel tips to ensure that you have less chances of becoming victims to this violence. Before we start, I want to remind you to subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell so you won't miss any of my future videos. I also encourage you to like this video if you enjoyed the content. It helps me get the word out on YouTube. I also encourage you to make any comments with any questions you may have or suggestions you might have of future content you would like me to cover. Also, don't forget to visit us on Facebook and Instagram at the links listed in the video and the description of this channel. Usually, I start my videos with the disclaimer that I am by no means an expert. For this video, I am going to speak to you from my personal experience of living and traveling throughout Mexico. I am also going to speak from my 30 years of experience working in the security field, to include an extensive experience working a full career for a federal law enforcement investigative agency on the southwest border. It just so happens that I was also raised on the South Texas border for most of my life, and I'm very familiar with the South Texas border culture. Now, I will remind people, like I always do, that every person's experience in Mexico is different. So what applies to one person may not to another. That is the uniqueness and adventure of living in Mexico. Just recently, I read a Mexican article about a Laredo family who disappeared on June 13, 2021 while traveling on a stretch of Highway 85 between Monterrey and Nuevo Laredo. This disappearance garnered national attention after the FBI got involved in the investigation and is currently assisting the Mexican authorities in the investigation of the disappearance. Truth is, Mexico has been keeping a dirty little secret. It has been uncovered that more than 50 people have disappeared on this stretch of highway since January 2021, and some of the missing people are actually Americans. As a matter of fact, it has even been dubbed the Highway of Death. As of this recording of this video, the number of reported missing is now up to 67. On June 26th, ABC News published a report about this Highway of Death and also addressed the death of 15 innocent bystanders in a shootout in Reynosa, Mexico. Since then, various Mexican articles have been published about the increased cartel violence in the state of Tamaulipas. I recently saw a post with a link to the ABC article in an expat Facebook group. The poster was concerned because he was planning to drive on Highway 85 and had concerns upon reading this article. I was amazed at some of the responses to this poster's concerns. There seems to be this nonchalant attitude that it was just the cartels and it doesn't pertain to expats. I often hear this argument that Mexico is safe and violence in Mexico is blown out of proportion because it's just cartels killing each other. Then people go on to argue that there are many places in the United States that are just as dangerous and even point out mass shootings and go on to say that the United States is more dangerous and they even feel safer here. There are even several posts of people who said that they just finished traveling this highway and they had no issues, so everything was safe and so not to worry. Then, shortly thereafter, another person posted about increased cartel violence in Mexico and warned people not to come and stay home. You can imagine that post didn't get a warm welcome. The discussion got so heated that the post was deleted. A follow-up post that I made in response to that post also became so controversial that the admin had to turn off the commenting. Which brings me to why I'm making this video. What I say today will still remain relevant in the future because this is nothing new. What I am going to do is dispel some myths and misconceptions that some expats have about how dangerous Mexico is, break down what is currently going on in the southwest border, and finally give you some tips so you can travel safely in Mexico and hopefully not fall victim to being in the wrong place at the wrong time. First, let me address some of the myths. One of the most common arguments that I hear is that violence here in Mexico is blown out of proportion. It's only a cartel thing, and as long as you stay away from the cartel areas, you will be fine. Folks, truth is that violence in Mexico is not blown out of proportion. In 2020, according to reporting, there were 34,515 homicides in Mexico. The homicide rate in the United States was 20,000 according to FBI statistics. Given the number of homicides in Mexico compared to the United States, I would say it's not blown out of proportion. Now, yes, a majority of those are cartel related, but what everybody seems to forget is that a good percentage of those homicides were innocent people that were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Last but not least, no matter where you live in Mexico, I guarantee you there is a cartel operating in your area. Now, this is another classic argument that I love to hear. I came from New York, Chicago, or a major city in the United States, and where I live here in Mexico is much safer, and I really feel much safer here. Well, the truth is that you can move from New York to Texas and be in a safer area. Moving to Mexico is not what is safer. Moving from a more dangerous place to a less dangerous place is what makes it safer. This argument has been coming up a lot more lately, especially with all the mass shootings that are going on in the United States. I am more likely to be caught up in a mass shooting in the United States than here. Truth is, here in Mexico, there are 10 times more mass shootings than in the United States, and unfortunately, innocent people are involved in those killings. This is also another common argument. I only travel the toll roads, so I will be safe as long as I don't take the Libre. Well, I have some news for you. Highway 85 is a toll road. Yes, the most dangerous stretch of highway in Mexico, also known as the Highway of Death, is a toll road. Not to mention, it is one of the most common routes taken by expats when traveling to and from the United States. I can go on with many more arguments, and I'm sure that when I post this video to various Facebook groups, I will get a ton of arguments, so I chose to pick the most common ones. I am pretty sure I will get plenty of feedback on how wrong I am. One thing that I've learned about expats is that they love to argue. That's fine though, because I'm not going to lie to you or myself just so I can feel safer. Like I say, this is a no-bull channel where we present you with the reality. Here is my point. Mexico is dangerous and violent, and yes, it is mostly cartel related, but truth is that people need to be aware of this. We tend to turn a blind eye and give ourselves justification in order to give ourselves a false sense of security. Somehow we fail because we have lived here for years and nothing has happened to me. This place is safe. Now, with me mentioning all those misconceptions, there is one argument that many people make that is very true and probably the most valid argument. No place is 100% safe. No matter where you live, there is danger. Danger is everywhere. The problem we have is that once we get into our safe zones, convincing ourselves that everything is okay, we tend to forget that. We tend to let our guard down. This is when we are most prone to being the victim of violence because you are more prone to get careless and not take the precautions that you should. You know, I like to laugh a little bit about this. But many of my coworkers often act surprised when I tell them I live in Mexico. The first words out of their mouths is, "Aren't you afraid of all the violence down there?" You know what my response is? I usually respond with, "Yes, that's what keeps me on my toes, and that's why I always take precautions." When I was working, people often told me, "Your job is pretty dangerous. Aren't you scared?" I used to say, "I'm always scared. The day that I'm not scared, I will quit, because that'll be the day that I will make a mistake that could be the end of me." Truth is that we always need to be aware, we always need to be alert, and we always need to take precautions. And this is everywhere, no matter where you travel or live. Now look, I'm not here to scare anyone or spread fear. I'm just trying to educate expats on the realities of living here, whether it's about adjusting to a new culture, learning the language, living here legally, or living here safely. I am just trying to give you the tools to living a wonderful life here in Mexico. I want you to enjoy the beauty of Mexico. Like I always tell people, as long as you come with your eyes wide open, you will love it here, and you will never want to return home. Now, let me address what's going on in Tamaulipas on the border. There are a lot of factors that are affecting what's going on in the border right now, and this is nothing new. This is the way the cartels have been operating for years. It could be that the cartels are fighting each other for territory, factions within the cartel are fighting for power, or the government is trying to intervene in cartel activity. This all creates violence, and sometimes there are periods of extreme violence followed by periods of calm. Also, when you have periods of extreme violence, the government tends to send recourses to the area, which creates more violence. For example, the 14 innocent people that were killed 2 weeks ago in Reynosa were actually caught up in the middle of a battle between the Mexican military commandos attempting to capture a cartel boss. Another factor that has played a big role has been the pandemic. The drug cartels have resorted to kidnapping and robbery to supplement their drug business, which has suffered just like many other businesses. As a matter of fact, since last year, there have been a string of robberies going on in Nuevo Laredo, and many victims of these robberies have been Americans, which is not commonly reported in the news. So this is nothing new. Now, these disappearances on the highway of death, they could be the result of robberies, but it could also be something else, and let me explain. At the present time, there are approximately 23 known and identified cartels in Mexico. The current Mexican president only acknowledges publicly that there are only 3 cartels. I have an idea why, and in following the news and events of the past few years, here is my analysis. Actually, I disagree with the president. My analysis is there's 2 major cartels in Mexico that control the Mexican drug trade. Now you ask, well, if you always say there's only 2 major cartels, what happened to the other 21? Yes, they exist, but do not hold the power that major 2 cartels have. So the 2 major cartels are making alliances with the remaining 21 cartels. Oftentimes, these alliances are either join us or fight us, and if you fight us, eventually you will end up joining us. But that's usually after a lot of carnage. Also, a very important thing to note, oftentimes when a major cartel moves in, they like to send messages to the cartel of the area by killing innocent people and members of the rival cartel from that area. Usually, this is part of the join us or else attitude. I suspect this is what's going on, along with a combination of robberies along that highway. So, what's the bottom line here? Violence has increased and innocent people are being affected, to include American and expats. Right now, crossing through Laredo, McAllen, or Brownsville is not safe at the moment, and Highway 85 has not been deemed safe yet by the Mexican government. The Mexican government has sent resources to that area, but remember what I said about violence increasing when the government decides to step up efforts? So you may ask, when will all this be over and when will it be safe? All I can tell you is that it'll never be over. And as far as being safe, only time will tell with careful monitoring of the situation. Now, this brings me to the last part of my video, which is safety. During one of the discussions on Facebook, I had mentioned that I had recently traveled between Monterrey through Reynosa to McAllen. The question came up on how could I be giving advice not to travel through that area when I did myself? It's the old argument of, well, Dad, you did it, so why can't I? First of all, let me make one thing clear. I did not travel on Highway 85, and I would never consider it at this present time or previously due to reports of increased robberies during the pandemic. Second, I have a 30-year background in security, and I grew up in the area and know it well. Also, my trip took careful planning, so my advice still stands. Do not travel through these areas at this time. Now, something interesting came up in the discussion, asking if I would share how I planned my trip. Well, that's a little complicated process because it was 30 years of training to get to that point. So my answer to that is, it's not that simple. Now, what I have decided to do is give you some travel tips when traveling in Mexico to ensure that you can stay safe. Now, these tips are general common sense tips. These are not tips on how to travel through a high-risk area. I repeat, these are not tips on how to travel through a high-risk area. These tips can be used not only while traveling in Mexico, but any other country as well. These are the tips that you may already follow, but here goes my safety tips. Check Facebook groups. There are several groups that give live updates on different areas I travel through. I even check these groups before I depart, not just a day or two before. I have even postponed trips due to information obtained on these groups. I rely heavily on the Mexican press. I always pick up a copy of El Norte when I arrive in Monterrey, and my wife has an online subscription, so we keep up to date with the local news in that area. This is another important reason why I suggest that you learn Spanish, because all these groups and newspapers are in Spanish. Now, this is a little more advanced, but even posting or reviewing expat Facebook groups will give you an idea of what's going on. Now, I do caution you to take the no big deal comments with a grain of salt, but many times people will post articles such as the one that stirred up all this controversy. My advice is to pay more attention to the original post than the comments when analyzing whether it's safe or not. Never travel alone. Traveling alone makes you a target. Now, I know many of you don't want to hear this one or don't have the ability to do this one, but as soon as you can, buy a Mexican vehicle. Driving in Mexico with foreign plates makes you a target. Travel in groups. I've seen many people who post on Facebook and meet so that they can travel in groups if at all possible. For example, one of my many precautions that I took on my last trip was to follow my brother-in-law to McAllen. Never, and I repeat, never travel at night. Always be aware of your surroundings. I know when you're on a long trip, many people like to sleep, but designate at least one person in the car to be a kind of lookout per se. Only stop at major gas stations with a lot of people. Now, this piece of advice is going to be a little controversial because I told you Highway 85 is a toll road. But a basic rule of thumb is always take the toll roads, even if Google Maps says it'll take you a little bit more time. Those roads tend to have a bigger concentration of police and military guarding the roads. And of course, at this time, Highway 85 between Laredo and Monterrey is an exception. Don't be brave. What do I mean by this? Never take the attitude that I'll be fine and nothing will happen and nothing's ever happened and take unnecessary risks. Now, I know that sometimes you can't follow all the tips, such as not driving a foreign plated vehicle, but that should be all the more reason to stay alert. Now, the most important advice that I can give you is stay alert and be aware. The worst thing you can do is give yourself a false sense of security. We used to say in the security and protection field, we always prepare for the things that probably will never happen. It's the one time that something happens that could be fatal. My motto is stay scared and take precautions, and you will live a safe, long, happy, and healthy life. And hopefully it'll be here in Mexico. Truth is, you can apply this not only just to your security, but to all aspects of your life. I even use this philosophy when it comes to my cancer, and I am confident that is why today I can say that I am cancer-free. But staying scared is what keeps my cancer away. You get my point? Now, with all that being said, remember, I never said the word be paranoid. There's a difference between being paranoid and being scared. Actually, probably a better word for scared would be aware. Until next time, don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed it, and see you soon.